Bitcoin just had its highest weekly and monthly closes ever, so why are we dumping? In today's video, we'll be discussing exactly this, going over the recent Bitcoin price action, and talking about President Trump's new trade deals. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Let's jump right into the video. First things first, let's take a look at the Bitcoin price action. So taking a look at this chart here, we can see that we popped above this range, and ultimately it seems like it was a deviation, as we discussed a few videos ago. Now, a lot of you were very bullish as we started approaching these highs, but I was warning you that it would be a potential short scenario because we weren't able to reclaim these highs right around 110.6K. We made it ever so slightly under that level, and then we came right back down into the range. Then we did hold support at around the 107.2K level, which is a key zone that I'll talk about in today's video, and we pumped back up, experiencing rejection right around 109.4K. Now, 109.4K, 109.5K is a very important level. The reason being, this was the previous all-time high that was set right around inauguration. If you don't believe me, I'll zoom out here and show you. We can see that this wick was right around this level on the exact inauguration day. So it made sense that we would experience some kind of resistance around this level, and right now we are back within the range. Now, I'm not saying that you should be going max short because we need to wait for certain confirmations. If you're in my Signal group, you already know that we entered a short position, and we're actually sitting in some pretty significant profits, right around $22,000 in profits. However, I wouldn't be jumping into a short right now until we get the proper confirmation. So what I'm looking at here to see further downside for Bitcoin would be breaking below 107.2K, because if I zoom out on the 4-hour time frame, we can see that this is a major level which we held as support over the past few days since July 2nd. So we bounced off of this level, then we came back down, bounced off of it again, got rejected at the previous all-time high set around inauguration, and now it looks like we're coming back down and we are back within this range, which I'll remind you is the choppy summer range that we've been talking about. So there is all the likelihood here that if we break below 107.2K, we can go back down to this level over here, which is around 105K. And then we break below here, obviously we can start discussing much lower levels. So right now, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm gonna start taking profits off of this short if we hold 107.2K as support. So as I said, don't be aggressive here, and in this choppy range, if you're not an experienced trader, I would not be going aggressive in any kinds of trades. We can't ignore the fact that there's also a chance for us to come back down to 105K and get a massive bounce, targeting liquidity to the upside. Now, if we take a look at the liquidity, there's a lot of liquidity up here, but there's a lot of liquidity below where we currently are as well. So in my opinion, looking at this map, there's still more likelihood that we head down a little bit lower if 107.2K does not hold as support. If we start holding 107.2K as support, there's a chance that the bulls can push us a little bit higher and grabbing some of that upside liquidity. So right here, taking a look at the Bitcoin exchange liquidation map, what you can see is that there's still more cumulative long liquidation leverage. If Bitcoin were to go down to $96,000, that equates to around $12 billion worth of cumulative long liquidation leverage. And on the right side here, if Bitcoin were to go all the way up to 120K, that would be $8.61 billion worth of cumulative short liquidation leverage. You know we like covering this chart on the channel, but I just thought I'd give you an update because more people are indeed jumping into shorts, but on the long term here, we're still seeing that there's more longs in the market. So perhaps we get a move lower before we go ahead and move higher. Now, it might be annoying for me to say, oh, we'll move lower to move higher, but ultimately this is the nature of the choppy summer range that we've been talking about. You might not like it, but this is exactly what we discussed months ago. I still think that we will continue to chop around, and I also think that we will have a better opportunity to buy Bitcoin and altcoins as they continue to bleed against Bitcoin as we head into August. There will likely be some kind of low August, September. Now, of course, as I always say, I don't have a crystal ball, but this would be within my expectations. So you can see we touched the top of this range 1, 2, 3 times, had the deviation above, and now it looks like we're trickling down lower. We also touched the bottom of this range 1, 2, 3 times. Now, whichever side breaks first would signify Bitcoin's next big move. And what I mean by this is that if Bitcoin were to chop around here, hold 107.2K as support, and bounce up again and hold the top of this trend line as support, at that point, we can start talking about targeting the liquidity right around the all-time high, because yes, there is a lot of liquidity there. However, if we get the confirmations below, this is perhaps the moment where we can start chopping around in the middle of this range only to go ahead and move lower. And as I said, I do think that we will have an opportunity to buy Bitcoin below 100K near the end of this summer. So let's see how that plays out. At that point, as I've said in my previous videos, of course, I would be accumulating a little bit of Bitcoin in preparation for the next big move for the end of this cycle, but I would more be looking at altcoins as they continue to bleed against Bitcoin. And we're starting to see that it's almost time for us to start dollar cost averaging into altcoins. We can see that the range lows here are right around 0.25. And so I would expect this to continue to bleed over the course of this summer. But as soon as we get close to this trend line, this gives you the best risk-adjusted returns for altcoins. Now, it doesn't mean that your altcoin will 100x from that point, but what it does mean is that at this point in time is when I would consider saying that altcoins give you better risk-adjusted returns compared to Bitcoin. I have to state the obvious in saying that if there's a huge catastrophe in the market, then Bitcoin would dump a lot less than altcoins, but this is the area where I would be willing to risk some of my capital into altcoins to hopefully chase higher returns before the bear market starts. Now, let's go over the trade deals because this is a massive topic. President Trump was to announce new trade deals today. You think of this as something positive. Great, new trade deals. But the first thing that came out today was he started sending individual trade letters to countries with new tariff rates. So this doesn't actually sound positive. So far, Trump has announced a 25% tariff on Japan, 25% tariff on South Korea, and as a matter of fact, as I'm recording this video, he also announced 30% tariff on South Africa and 25% tariffs on Malaysia and Kazakhstan. So this is kind of annoying. I mean, this is not what the markets were expecting, and obviously we got a little bit of drawdown here, but Bitcoin is still holding relatively steady, right around $108,000. The reason I'm telling you to not go short here, of course, nothing that I talk about on this channel is financial advice, is because there's always the risk that we go ahead and bounce higher. I'm happy with my entry on that trade that I showed you, and so if you're in my community, you're likely in some significant profits, but right now it doesn't give you the best risk-adjusted returns in terms of the trade. Next up here, Trump also said that he'll be raising tariffs on Japan if they raise tariffs on the US in retaliation. Meanwhile, the S&P 500's losses are accelerating to around 1% today. Did Liberation Day Part 2 just begin? And let's take a look at the S&P 500. We can see that we got a little bit of a correction here on the daily, but ultimately we are still above the previous highs, and we put in that all-time high last week. So let's see how things develop. But right now, if you're just dollar cost averaging into the S&P 500, there's nothing to really be concerned about. Now, as it pertains to crypto, obviously, if the S&P 500 continues to dump over the next few days over the course of this week, then naturally, Bitcoin will be moving lower and the rest of the crypto market will bleed against Bitcoin. But speaking of that, if we take a look at Bitcoin dominance, some of you will be saying, look, Bitcoin dominance is red. It's almost time for altcoin season. Not so fast. We've seen these corrections time and time again. And if I'm making a bet here, it would be that Bitcoin dominance would continue to chop around this area before it eventually rolls up into the 66% range and possibly as high as 70%, as we've discussed on the channel at length. Next thing I want to show you is the fact that Trump's tariffs letters go out and the 10-year note yield is back to 4.4%. Yields are just around 20 basis points below the highs seen when President Trump announced a 90-day tariff pause. And he's a little bit flimsy with this pause, which we'll get into. We have reached a point where yields are rising regardless of the trade war situation. Deficit spending has completely taken control of long-term rates. The market is crystal clear. And speaking of the tariffs, we can see here that he's going to sign action today, delaying tariffs to August 1st. 12 other countries are to receive trade letters today, so we'll see how that develops. Obviously, I'm recording this video and only 4 or 5 countries have received those trade letters, but I will make sure to keep you updated in my free Telegram community down below. By the way, that's also where I go ahead and post those trades. So if you want to trade with me, perhaps get entries as I've been getting in this crypto market, you have the first link in my description down below. It'll bring you directly to my free Telegram community where you can join, and I also have a signals group, and I'm updating you on a daily basis. Also, if you'd like to trade with me, you have the second link in my description down below, which brings you directly to Bluffin, tons of bonuses. If you deposit $2,000 to trade with as you normally would, you get $300 back immediately for free for your futures trading. Obviously, you can't withdraw this right away, but you can use this for trading, and whatever profits you make, you get to keep right away. And the next thing I want to show you as we prepare to wrap up this video, President Trump threatens additional 10% tariff on any country aligning themselves with anti-American policies of BRICS. There will be no exceptions to this policy. And let's wrap up this video taking a look at Bitcoin once more. We are still within the range, the choppy summer range. Now, we're at the high of this range. If you wanted to short, it would have been at the deviation above this range, which is exactly what we did in my free Telegram community. Right now, I would just sit tight and be patient. If we get confirmation below 107.2K, at that point, it is likely that we find our way back to around, at the bare minimum, 106.2K, down to probably $105,000. However, if we hold this area as support, then there's a strong chance that we could get a nice bounce targeting the liquidity to the high. Don't be aggressive here if you haven't already entered a trade. And that sums up today's video. Bitcoin chopped back into the range as we've been talking about at length over the past few days. Right now is decision time. If Bitcoin breaks below this key level, we will likely find our way back into the middle of this range. And while this is happening with Bitcoin, Trump continues to impose tariffs on country after country after country. I'll make sure to keep you updated as to how this develops. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.